Well, hello, everybody. I'm Bob Harris. What was that? That was kind of lame, right? I'm Bob Harris. A little more strident. I kind of prefer the strident approach. Hello, everybody. This is the Football Diehards YouTube channel. Our Saturday Ask Me Anything. We do this every week here every noon every Saturday. We also do Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. I know many of you are there. Golf Boy, Brian Larkin, Albert, all here. Greetings to all of you. I'll be here to take your questions. We'll discuss a number of topics today. Have a great guest, as always, who will replace the second me. I think that's very vital. I think one of me is probably enough me's. Not a ton of news going on. We'll talk about some of it with the guests. The schedule release obviously is a big deal. Kind of, if the draft is the green flag for the fantasy football season, the schedule certainly adds to that. That gives us understand what the bye weeks are. We can all go back to all our best ball teams that we've already drafted and lament how many poor choices we made in terms of the bye weeks. So, and I see the question from Brian: which running back has the easiest playoff week? I think that there's a number of running backs that have really easy schedules. I don't know if I've dug down into the final closing week. I think it's the teams that I saw that I noticed early on. One of them is the Titans. I think the Broncos. I think the Steelers as well over the course of the season. But the Titans and Steelers down the stretch seem to have really easy ones, which is great news. I mean, Najee Harris, if you're looking for reasons to draft him beyond just the volume, maybe an easy schedule at the end of the season. So again, have not done the full analysis yet, but there are some great stuff going on. Yeah, Henry has a great playoff schedule, and so does Najee Harris. So we'll like that. Hello, Andrea. Thanks for coming in. Let's get into some of this. Let's bring on our guest right now. From the Dynasty Vipers channel and all the great video content he does there. Matt Donnelly is here to join us and chop things up. One of my favorite people in the business. I'm sure you all follow him on Twitter, and if you don't, you should do so now at Matt Donnelly FF, Donnelly FF. Get there, hit that, like all his stuff too, and like all our stuff. This is a channel on YouTube. Subscribe, hit the like button. I know you all do. I'm going to hit the dislike button just because I like to keep the karma in line. Matt, how are you today, young man?
I'm doing good here. I'm just kind of on that slow path of recovery here. Just had an operation here a few days ago, which has possessed some problems here and there. I mean, the other day I kind of sat back and looked like a turtle on the backside on a shell trying to get back up. So it's been a little bit difficult from time to time, but it's given me a lot more opportunities to work on fantasy football. So we've kind of been working on that here recently, updating some rankings there, updating the strengths of schedule, taking a look. Like you said, talk about Derrick Henry having that good schedule down the back stretch. Yeah, absolutely. He's got two of the best matchups there in weeks number 15, 16, and as well as week number 17. So just kind of diving into that, the whole schedule. We had that schedule release. What does that mean for fantasy football? What does that mean for the strength of schedule? Who's got those good matchups later on in the season? And that kind of gives you an idea of who are some guys that maybe, especially when we talk about rookies, that are going to be able to hit later on in the season.
Yeah, I think there is some good stuff. So just general. Well, I'm sure we'll get questions on that. If you have questions, put them in the YouTube chat. I will get to them and present them to Matt. Andrea says, "Hi, Matt. Everyone's happy to see you, Matt. Even I'm happy to see you. And I'm glad the recovery is going at pace. You should have seen him come into the room. He stumbled, he bumbled, he rumbled. The noises were made. There was all kinds of mechanical assistance. It was awesome, Matt. I felt like I was watching the end of one of the big speedway races at NASCAR." A huge accident comes rolling in. I'm glad you made it. So as you mentioned some of those strength schedule numbers. What are beyond the bye weeks? What is it you're looking for at this point? How much stock do you put into it? I mean, granted, I can see using them as hair splitters, but there's going to be changes, or the defenses. We're basing everything on last year's stats. So how much stock do you put into all this?
Honestly, not a whole heck of a lot when I look at the strengths of schedule and I look at the teams and how it lines up, except for the fact that maybe, like I said, some of these rookies, I think it means a lot. So if you have a rookie that's going to have a tough schedule on paper at the start of the season, we know rookies usually hit their stride around weeks 8, week 9, week 10, especially at the wide receiver position. So it's kind of like, okay, what is that going to look like? What rookies have the best opportunity to have a breakout later on in the season? It doesn't mean they're going to break out, but like you said, when we're splitting hairs here, when we're looking at running backs, I'm looking at a guy like, say, Travis Etienne, who's got a fairly difficult week 15 and 16 compared to some of the other running backs in the league. And then you look at someone, I don't know, I'm going to use Denver, for example. If someone out of that Denver backfield does come out, they got a very favorable schedule. So for me, that's splitting hairs. I love Travis Etienne. I also think that they got a young running back there that they just drafted that's going to be a factor down the road there as well. So how is that going to look like? How's that going to break down? It's not the be end all of anything when you're looking at how to look at it. But if you're looking for sleepers, then maybe that strength of schedule does kind of play a factor into what you're looking at down the stretch. But hey, we've heard the Macho Man say for years, the cream always rises to the top. And that's what you're going to get with these fantasy players, no matter what. If Derrick Henry had the worst strength of schedule, he's still going to be a top 5 running back when it's all said and done if he remains healthy. So the best players are still going to be the best players at the end of the day. But if you're looking for those guys that could surprise, maybe a wide receiver 3 or 4 that could creep into the top 24, that's when the strength of schedule kind of may factor into things.
Yeah, it's a couple of comments in there. And hello, Wendy. Hello, Dame Overboard. Hello, Mr. Scampers. I appreciate everyone coming today. Andrea notes she thought Buffalo had a tough schedule. I did notice that as well. And again, I think something that Matt said makes most sense to me. I mean, good teams are still gonna play good. So the hair splitting aspect of this, when I'm sitting there at a point in a draft and I'm trying to decide between 2 players, maybe then I'm like a little more worried about, I pay a little more attention to strength of schedule. I let's put it this way. I'm not letting the schedule scare me off players that I'm in on, but I mean, sometimes it can be a determining factor. Brian Larkin wants to know, Matt, if you have any wide receivers that you like based on this late in the season, the week 15 through 17 stretch, that's all important to everybody.
Yeah, one of the receivers, and I make no bones about it, but I do like how Green Bay's schedule typically sets up towards the back end of the season there. Very favorable in weeks 15, 16, and 17, and especially 17. It's one of the more favorable schedules on the docket. So for me, if you remember watching what Christian Watkins did that last season, Watson there, he had a big back end of the season. Well, for me, one of my guys coming out of this draft has been Jaden Reed. And I don't know if he's going to be that factor off the get-go of the season for the first 3-4 weeks because Michigan State didn't ask him to do a whole heck of a lot when he was at Michigan State. But we know he can be a vertical threat. We also know he had a 50% or greater contested catch rate through 3 seasons there at Michigan State. And if you look at his man, press, and zone splits, he's one of the best wide receivers coming out of last year's class, which you look at everything, going with a new young quarterback in Jordan Love. A quarterback, especially trying to get his feet under the ground in the National Football League, is always going to be looking for a security blanket. What is a more secure blanket than a guy that wins against man, wins against press, and that wins those contested catches like Jaden Reed? So when I'm looking at a draft, a guy I'm taking a late flyer on is going to be Jaden Reed, who could be very surprising down the stretch, especially when we look at how favorable it is. New Orleans, they have a more difficult schedule on the back end than they do at the front end, but again, another team that has a good schedule on the back end is going to be the Atlanta Falcons, assuming that they decide they're going to start throwing the ball, which, you know what, with Arthur Smith there, it's really tough to say one way or the other. But Drake London is going to be one of those guys I think could flirt with top 15 wide receiver potential this season.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense as well. And I think one of the teams that does have kind of an easy run over the course of the season for wide receivers is the Seattle Seahawks. And so that brings up a question from Paul Krasminski. Did I butcher that, Paul? Paul, who do you think will be more fantasy friendly, Jordan Addison or Jackson Smith and Jigba? And I think Matt and I probably feel the same about this, but go ahead, Matt.
Well, I don't know where we're going, but for season 1, for redraft, I'm going to lean towards Jordan Addison here. I just like how this sets up for him. No disrespect to Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think 3 years down the road, he's going to be the best wide receiver in this class. But please put some respect on Tyler Lockett's name. He has been literally a top 15 wide receiver for as many years as he's been healthy with DK Metcalf on. Actually, I think Jackson Smith and Jigba will take more touches away from DK Metcalf than he will from Tyler Lockett when it's all said and done. I do think Smith and Jigba is going to be the replacement for Tyler Lockett, who's entering his 30 years season or 31 years. I can't remember if he's 30 or 31 at the time, but I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to have a little bit tougher. Now, I know Jordan Addison's got Jefferson. I know he's got TJ Hawkinson there, but we also know that the Minnesota Vikings, they like to spread that ball around, make some plays, and Jordan Addison is the best route runner, bar none, from this class. As good as JSN has been as a route runner, Jordan Addison does it even better. He plays inside, he plays outside. We saw that at USC. I just like what he brings, especially in a redraft setting compared to Smith-Njigba, who may be the better long-term investment. But I think right now, this season, it's Addison.
I agree with that. I think he comes up in a little higher in the pecking order, although, you've got to count TJ Hawkins at that pecking order. But look at last year. I mean, did Adam Thielen not hit 100 targets? KJ Osborne was right up there, 70-plus targets as well, I believe. So, and TJ Hawkinson got a ton of targets. So there are targets to go around. You would think there might be a little fewer in Seattle, but maybe not. I mean, expecting DK Metcalf to get, what did he get last year? I want to say 140 in that range. Maybe his drop off 20, maybe we get a slight drop off in Tyler Lockett. He hits 100. It's not, if they go a little lighter on the tight ends, who got a lot of targets last year just out of necessity because they had no wide receiver 3. Thinking Jackson Smith-Njigba could hit 90 targets is not like a total reach. So, but I'm with you. Jordan Addison is the guy for me. Just the hierarchy works in his favor. And as our friend Matt Waldman has noted, he's the kind of that guy that working opposite a bully, he'll do really well. And Justin Jefferson is that in the fantasy world. So appreciate that question, Paul. And again, go ahead and throw all your questions in the chat. We will get to them as we get along. Brian Larkin agreed with that as well. Messed up last game of the season. Did not play Mike Evans. I guess my season starts today with your show. Robert Taylor, welcome to Fantasy Football 2023. We're so glad to have you on board. And we'll do this every week in case you're just now tuning in. We do it every Saturday at noon, every Wednesday night at 7. You can also listen to the Football Diehards radio program. Right now, we're on every Saturday night from 7 to 9 p.m. Tonight, Drew Davenport from Football Guys and the Auction Brief podcast will be our guest, and we'll get into all kinds of things with him. So, but for now, we have some more questions here. A golf boy wants to know, for best ball, do we like stacking running backs from the same team, like Kamara, Williams, Dobbins, Gus? I'll go ahead and throw in Miami, although Devin A-Chain maybe messes that up a little bit prior to that draft pick. It's not unusual to see a number of my teams have both Wilson and Mostert because it's a really strong rushing attack. How do you feel about that, Matt?
I've never been a big fan of stacking my running backs in best ball. Stacking wide receivers with a quarterback and a running back, going with the triple stack, absolutely, I'm okay with that. It's just, it's kind of, maybe I'm old and stuff, but I kind of think about the whole redraft thing. I'd rather have a running back that could be a starter. Maybe he's the backup. Maybe like Alexander Madison. I think I'd rather have another team's handcuff as my best ball back rather than my own team's handcuff, because I want to believe that the guy I drafted is going to be the starter. Now, if I go out there and grab another starter who's a handcuff to another running back, that makes me feel much better about my opportunities. So I'm not as big on stacking running backs from the same team, unless you've got yourself situations that we had in the past there, a Nick Chubb with a Kareem Hunt type thing, where it's very different. David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs is a great example where I have no problem stacking, because I don't think that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a running back this season for the Detroit Lions. I think they're going to use him in the slot. I think they're actually lining him out outside. So then you've got your huge PPR advantage of Jahmyr Gibbs as a running back. I think David Montgomery is still going to give you top 12 running back potential, because this Detroit Lions team was averaging like 1.84 yards per attempt before contact last season. That's why we've seen Jamal Williams have the season that he had. So if I'm stacking running backs, it's going to be very dependent on the situation and what these running backs bring to the table. So David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, no problem stacking that. Now, New Orleans, I have no idea what's going on there. We don't know, and I love the fact that you have Drew Davenport coming on with the auction brief, coming onto your show there tonight to talk about potentially Alvin Kamara in that legal situation. What does that mean for Jamal Williams? What does that mean for Kendre Miller this season? Now, I think Kendre Miller is in a good spot moving forward as far as dynasty is concerned, because I think New Orleans is going to probably move on from Kamara. Williams is only there for a short period of time, but for this season, that's a mess. I don't want to waste 3 draft picks just to secure one position.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So just if Mr. Scampers puts a fine point on this, in big tournaments, I don't like my own backup. In smaller fields, sure. And I think mostly what I've been playing it in is smaller fields, just the head-to-head contests on Best Ball 10s and Underdog. Well, we're going to get into the Best Ball Mania 4 thing here at some point and talk about some of the strategies there. But I would agree with that. But also, I think in Best Ball, what you have the advantage of is it's got to be organic. Like I mentioned, the Wilson Mostert prior to Devin A-Chain showing up. Look, having a monopoly on that Miami backfield where they're going to be running the ball and somebody there is going to be scoring points. It makes a little sense because those guys are both going really late in the draft, right? I'm getting them both in the double-digit rounds. So be careful. Don't overinvest. Do it organically, just like all stacking to me. I don't want to force stacks. I mean, there's some that happen early organically. But for the most part, I'm looking for wide receiver quarterback combinations that we mentioned the Seattle. I think by the way, Mr. Scamper's keen on Tyler Lockett. I think it's been 5 straight years, at least 8 touchdowns and a couple 10 touchdown seasons. I mean, he's been money in best ball for sure, and goes a fair amount later than DK Metcalf, who maybe doesn't give you that same spike week performance, although he does have them. But anyway, you get the point there. But I think the stacking, or just I don't even call it stacking running backs in best ball. I call it monopolizing an offense, monopolizing a backfield. And I think Detroit's a good example because you're going to might overpay for Jahmyr Gibbs, but Montgomery's coming to good value. So I think you can get both of those guys for sure. Let's see, what round would you assure yourself of Addison? I was just going to check the latest ADP. I have a number of them. Let's look at the best ball 10s though, where I'm playing a lot right now. Underdogs is a pretty good one as well, but there are a lot of contests going on. Let me just get it up to date here. And I like to do it since the draft just to kind of, helps out a little bit. And the wide receivers, I think Addison, from what I remember, is at a pretty reasonable level. And yeah, getting him as a wide receiver 4. He's going in the same range as Michael Thomas, Jamison Williams, who we know is going to miss 6 games. Rashad Bateman going a little after him. Among the other rookies, Jackson Smith-Njigba is going ahead of him, so I like the value there. Smith-Njigba is wide receiver 38 right now, just outside the top 3 range. So I think they're pretty good prices on all of them if you feel like taking chances. Dame Overboard would like us to know she finished her first 2 rookie drafts and wants to know how she did, Matt. Richardson at 102, JSN at 107, Addison 108, Mims 208, Bigsby 308, Sean Tucker 408. I'll just jump in and say, once you get Anthony Richardson, you've got the super high-end lottery ticket. I'd be pretty happy with that draft as is, and all the other pieces are great as well. Go ahead, Matt.
Sorry, you can never go wrong with a ham cannon, right? Anyone with the nickname ham cannon, you can't go wrong with it. And I've been on the record here. I said I almost prefer in Superflex to go with Anthony Richardson over Bijan Robinson. And I get that Bijan Robinson is going to be that generational talent here. And I'm swinging for upside here with Anthony Richardson more often than not. But you get a running back, you're going to get 8 years out of him. You get a quarterback, you're going to get 10 to 15 years out of him. And I think that's the difference, not to get caught up in the now. Especially if you're looking at Dynasty, you want to look long-term, solidifying that quarterback position. So I love that. And then you get yourself JSN and Jordan Addison, who are going to be both likely wide receiver 2s, wide receiver 3s in their rookie season already. So that's going to help you right there. I love Tank Bigsby, the addition of him there, because in Jacksonville, it's Travis Etienne, then it's Tank Bigsby, and then it's JaMychal Hasty. And we know that Travis Etienne, he tore that ACL in his rookie season. He's just coming back into it. He's a little undersized per the running back position. Doesn't mean he can't run between the tackles, but Jacksonville may ask him to do that less if they've got a running back that can do the job, which is Tank Bigsby. If you could look at a running back like a build-a-back, Tank Bigsby is that build-a-back running back, 5'11", 200-plus pounds. That's exactly what you want in a between-the-tackles type running back. So Jacksonville's feeling pretty good. I like that spot for him. And Sean Tucker, I mean, him going as an undrafted free agent was a bit of a surprise, but not a shock because there was some health concerns and stuff and red flags that kind of went on with him. Again, another running back in a good position. He signed right where he needed to sign there as the backup to Rachaad White, who's going to have a lot of touches there in Tampa Bay, but he's not going to have all the touches in Tampa Bay. So Tucker could come in middle of the season and be a factor as well. So I really like how this draft shaped up for you, especially when you have 3 first-round draft picks. It's hard not to like what you're doing.
Yeah, this feels like somewhere Mike Dempsey would be glowing with pride. He heard this draft. He sees all these picks. This is a great draft, Dame. And I agree with the whole Richardson idea. Like, if you look at it, like, I have not seen Richardson go ahead of Bijan Robinson in any of the rookie drafts I've been in. Bijan's been the first guy off the board, and that's, perfectly suitable to me, too. I'd almost rather have that next pick, and I would take the chance on Richardson. If you're looking at the, just the NFL draft in general, even the first round, I mean, the failure rate is pretty high. So if you're taking chances as is, and we're going to talk about a couple of rookies here, maybe we'll just bring this up right now. Everyone who's been on Twitter has seen the Bryce Young clip, right? Where he looks like a small child playing alongside his much larger teammates. I get it. It's the offensive line he's standing next to, but he looks slight, right? I think I saw one comment. I think it was Dave Kluge on Twitter basically said, look, it's not like, when you heard Russell Wilson was 5'10", 204, Bryce Young doesn't look as stout, right? He looks kind of slight. What do you think? I mean, obviously we're overreacting to it because we overreact to everything. But does that bring up any concerns for you, based on what we've heard? Or you go back to the college level and look and see that he was pretty dominant and didn't really have any issues with size?
You know what? I'm not too worried about the size. And this comes back to playing for Nick Saban there at Alabama in a pro-style offense already against other professional athletes in the SEC. There's no real easy games for them. Playing with Alabama, playing LSU, playing Georgia. He had his best game. Look at Georgia. Look at Georgia's defense. This is a defense that he played fairly well against much of his college career.
You want to look at their defense, look at the Eagles right now, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. He's basically been playing the Philadelphia Eagles for 2-3 seasons already going back to college. So I'm not worried about Bryce Young's height issues here, especially, and Carolina's done a good job supporting him already. Look at what they've put around him. They've already secured a couple good offensive linemen in previous drafts. Then this season, knowing full well that Bryce Young was going to be their guy, their head coach has quarterback experience, right? I mean, that's going to help him. And then you surround him with Adam Thielen, Hayden Hurst, Miles Sanders, Jonathan Mingo is another guy that they brought in through the draft. So they surrounded him with weapons to succeed early on in his career. Not like what they used to do with quarterbacks way back when. Prior to Josh Allen getting Stephon Diggs, no help. Prior to the Eagles essentially getting A.J. Brown, no help. You look at these guys, not very many quarterbacks get help early on in their career. And these teams that we're seeing, and it's not just Carolina. Houston did a good job in supporting. Indianapolis has done a good job in supporting these quarterbacks prior to them coming into their rooms or into their buildings. And then I look at this, and you talk about Bijan Robinson. I'm not going to fault anyone for taking Bijan Robinson, but how many running backs continue to have elite seasons after that second contract? Whereas these quarterbacks, they start to pick up their pace after that second contract. So again, for the dynasty, this is where you separate some of these quarterbacks. And as much as I love Anthony Richardson, if I'm sitting at 101, I'm willing to trade back as far as 104 to get one of these quarterbacks here, because maybe you throw in a good running back, maybe a back-end RB1, a high-end RB2, plus I get myself a quarterback as Stroud or Young or Anthony Richardson, and it cost me Bijan Robinson. I get it. It's going to cost me a little bit there, but I feel much better about my position moving forward, having one of these top-end quarterbacks, especially one like Bryce Young there or Anthony Richardson, who have that Konami code ability, where Stroud doesn't really have that ability as much as the other two.
Also, do you factor this in as well? I mean, the coaching staffs of the respective teams. You look at the Carolina Panthers with Frank Reich and his assistants, including Dave Caldwell in there, and among others, and they've built this really good staff that seems like it'd be very good at developing quarterbacks. Frank Reich, a former quarterback, and also the same with Richardson in Indianapolis, where Shane Steichen comes off 2 stops in which he developed 2 of the better quarterbacks in Justin Herbert. And he did it different ways. Herbert had the most pass attempts in the league his rookie year. Jalen Hurts, his most recent prospect there, worked it a different way, but ended up with great results fairly early with both of them. Does that lend some confidence in you? Or if it doesn't lend additional confidence, is it a little bit of a concern with Stroud, who goes in with Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator, who comes over from San Francisco, kind of a running game coordinator there, not a play caller? Is that an issue for you?
Normally, I would say yes, but when I look at these 3 quarterbacks coming out, Stroud actually looked like he was the most pro-ready. Less concerns about his game. Pocket passer, can make all the throws, better at progression reads than most people give him credit for. Look at that Clemson tape in the semifinals. So I have no concerns about Stroud there. I mean, he's a little bit behind the 8 ball as far as the coaching is concerned moving forward, because, yes, Frank Reich is going to help Bryce Young in those little areas. I mean, Bryce Young's already probably more developed fundamentally in his progressions and his reads. And if you want to use the S2 scores, use the S2 scores. and all that fun stuff. I mean, he's very intelligent. He impressed Carolina brass with his knowledge of the game and this and that. So I'm not worried about his development. I'm not worried about Stroud's development there because I think he's probably already further developed physically as a quarterback compared to the other two. Bryce Young's going to always have those size concerns. The first couple batted balls that he has, people go, oh, he's too small to throw. No, don't worry about that. Drew Brees, they figured it out. These smaller quarterbacks are going to figure it out at some point. And then Anthony Richardson, though, I like this because you mentioned his coach has already developed two of the more elite fantasy options in fantasy football, in Justin Herbert and in Jalen Hurts. And he's done it in a magnitude of ways here, multiple ways here, not the same, which means he's going to cater to Anthony Richardson and what he does best. So expect Anthony Richardson to rely on his legs early on in his career, much like Jalen Hurts, much like Lamar Jackson, for the team to have success. And the passing aspect of the game is going to develop as the season progresses. And maybe Richardson doesn't have the best of the three this season. But year 2, year 3, that's where we see these big jumps in guys like Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton's, the Jalen Hurts. There's a reason why they went out there and got themselves Anthony Richardson over Will Levis. And Will Levis is talented. Don't get me wrong. He's talented. He's weird, but he's talented. And they chose Anthony Richardson. I wouldn't have been surprised if Indianapolis would have gone with Richardson with the first overall pick if they had it, because they see a lot of Jalen Hurts in his abilities. And that's exactly what this game is moving to. It's not about the stay in the pocket passer. And for fantasy, we've always loved mobile quarterbacks, right? We've always loved these quarterbacks that move the pocket, pick up yards with their legs, pick up the touchdowns on the ground. NFL has always been that old man's club where we want a pocket passer. He's got to be 6'3". He's got to be 230 pounds. That's not the case anymore. These teams, these coordinators want these mobile quarterbacks because it changes the whole aspect of the game. It makes the defensive coordinators have to think a little bit more. So, yeah, I think that Anthony Richardson could have very well been the first overall pick by Indianapolis based on who they have calling the shots in that war room.
Sometimes, like in the end, it doesn't matter, right? Teams are going to draft whoever they draft, and we like to sit there in advance and try and sort these things out and get the lead. But maybe just like the hiring, Arizona hiring Cliff Kingsbury kind of was a tell of what direction they were going at quarterback. I wonder if in hindsight we shouldn't have looked at Steichen. If you felt like you knew Indianapolis was going to go quarterback, and I know whatever all the chatter out there. But maybe this was part of the overall plan. They may have had this in mind all along, and I suspect they did, and just were very quiet about it. And you're right about Stroud. I mean, he is the most pro-ready, and so I guess that's the right now. If you're sitting here, as you said, if I had to predict one of those three not opening the season as a starter, it would be Richardson, right? Gardner Minshew is there.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the desired outcome. I think they want Richardson to start from the get-go. I want him to start from the get-go because I have high hopes for him. But he might be a little more of a project. We know the passing accuracy was not there. I keep reminding people it was not there for Josh Allen either. And he got better at it. And players do improve at that. Mr. Scampers likes the weird but talented. Will Levis can throw the ball. There's no questioning that. And I think he landed in a really good spot. I was surprised the Titans didn't reach up to get that fifth-year option on him, just trade up to the end of the first round. But whatever the case, I think he's in a good spot as well. And Hendon Hooker, we've heard, there's no rushing him in. And you wonder if Jared Goff, we'll talk about the Lions here in a second, Matt, just this offense in general. Let's do that now. Jahmyr Gibbs tweaked his ankle, people. Here's the thing, right? We're going to hear all these little newsy tidbits. We're going to see the clips of Bryce Young, looking tiny. And we're going to see Jahmyr Gibbs has a little minor ankle tweak. And people are going to play that up. And if you're drafting in the moment, don't be afraid to leverage these little things. I always make the same stupid joke every year, so I'll make it again. Be the fantasy fireman, run into that building of burning value and drag the body out. When you get these little events that cause, ADP to fluctuate or have people dial back, it's early in the year. If you're drafting this time of year, you're probably drafting a lot of teams. This isn't your only draft that you're going to be in, the one you're doing right now. Go ahead and take some chances. And then as the season gets nearer, start dialing in that strategy based on all the things you've learned and all the drafts you've done up to this point. That's why we're doing the drafts now. I want to be honed in and dialed in and be dominant when the time matters. Part of that is taking risks and seeing what the outcomes are. Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm not worried about him. You mentioned it. You kind of ran through it nicely. I do think, he and David Montgomery are both in a good place for primarily the reason you suggested. That offensive line is a road grading unit. And they tend to get a lot of short touchdown opportunities, says Jamal Williams. who cashed in on most all of them. But Jared Goff, has not been going as early as I thought he might. He's better apparently half his games than he is in other halves. Some kind of thing with the road and home splits, I'm told. But I kind of like him. I think he's a value play right now. Do you like Jared Goff as a value going off and as a quarterback too, essentially?
Oh, absolutely. I think he's a quarterback too that's going to give you quarterback one numbers. You mentioned these splits there at home. He is a quarterback one every single week. I mean, there's no doubt. We're talking about a top 5 scoring offense. If you don't want the quarterback of a top 5 scoring offense, then you obviously don't want to win in fantasy football. It's really that simple. And this is a guy you're getting him for pennies on the dollar, late in drafts. Nobody wants him because it's Jared Goff. He's not a sexy name. He really isn't. I mean, you look at some of these other names that are probably going before him. Wilson, I think, is probably going before him. Geno Smith's probably going before him. Daniel Jones is probably going before him. No, I'll take Jared Goff, and I'm kind of working on my rankings right now, and I've got Jared Goff as my QB 11 entering the season right now. I'm not done tweaking it, and that might change. He might go up and down a little bit here, but he's going to be in that QB 10 to QB probably 14 range right up until kickoff of the start of the season, because I really think he is a low-end QB1 or a high-end QB2, and you can do a lot worse. He's not a guy you have to spend a lot to get. I mean, if you want a solid QB2 or a QB1, you could probably get him, like you said, those double-digit rounds, probably round 13, 12, whatever that looks like, depending on what your league looks like. I mean, we've had some mock drafts, Bob, where quarterbacks go a little bit earlier than they would because people are looking for that second quarterback. I'm a firm believer if you don't have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. I mean, if your top quarterback goes down and you are left trying to make things happen with a Desmond Ridder or Ryan Tannehill as your QB2, you're probably going to be in trouble. So if you hit, like say you go early, you get a quarterback early like a Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, you feel pretty set about that position moving forward, and that's when you grab a guy like Jared Goff much later in the draft. And you know what? If he goes off, then you have a potential trade opportunity later down in the season, which you can package him up. Yeah. So that's where I'm looking at Jared Goff's biggest value, because I think he is going to be a top 12 quarterback, and he's going to give you value later on in the season.
Yeah, currently going as a quarterback 16 in best ball 10s. And there's a handful of guys outside in that range that I would be happy rolling with as my starter. One of them is Geno Smith. I mean, he's going crazy, going way lower than you would expect. Guy's coming off what was it, quarterback 5 last year? He's going off as quarterback 12. He's kind of snuck back into the tail end of the quarterback ones. I think that's a great value. Kirk Cousins at 13, Tua Tagovailoa at 14. Someone I'm investing in pretty heavily. You can always grab Mike White late, people, now that you have a clear-cut option behind him. So yeah, this is the time to take some of those chances. I agree with you. Amon-Ra St. Brown locked in, I'm guessing, is, I'm drafting him early to mid-second round, especially if I go with one of those boom busts. Let's say you go Tyreek Hill in the first round and you come back around. I feel really good about adding a kind of the leavening agent, if you will, the guy that kind of is going to give you that more steady production if you're worried about the boom bust. I kind of call him the new Keenan Allen. You feeling pretty good about Amon-Ra St. Brown carrying on? We know Jameson Williams is going to miss 6 games, but at some point he's going to come in and cut into the numbers. I don't know that Sam Laporta is a concern or any of the other receivers are concerned. Maybe Williams shouldn't be a concern either, right?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, Amon-Ra St. Brown is still a top 10 fantasy option at the wide receiver position. So if you're getting him as your wide receiver 2 behind a Tyreek Hill, you got to be feeling really good about your wide receivers right there. I mean, if you're doing that strategy, it's Tyreek Hill, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, then you're probably either punting the running back position, because I know a lot of these drafts that I've been doing here recently, the running backs have been surprisingly coming off the board a lot sooner than I would have anticipated. I would have thought this would have been the rebirth of the wide receiver position, taking what do you figure on average in a best ball? You're looking at almost a split in the first round with 7 wide receivers going.
Yep.
And then in the back end, I mean, it's very wide receiver heavy. But the value of the running backs, if you look as you get further into that draft, it gets thin really quick. By rounds 4, rounds 5, it is like you're looking at Raheem Mostert as your top option in round 6 as a running back. And now you're like, okay, well, might as well go wide receiver, because there's so much depth at that wide receiver position, even though they're coming off the board so much sooner. So for me, I'm feeling good about, like you said, if I go Tyreek Hill and then Amon-Ra St. Brown, I need to hit running back the next 2 rounds and then load up on these wide receivers a little bit later. That all depends on, again, if you want to get that positional advantage at maybe the quarterback position. If a quarterback drops into rounds 3 and 4 that you really, really like, Bob, you and me, we both are not the kind of guy to go for a quarterback early in a draft. It's not really our style. We kind of like to wait on guys like Geno Smith, Jared Goff, maybe later on going the back-to-back on a turn on something with those type of quarterbacks. Tight end position, if you want Travis Kelce, another great option there because he gives you a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 overall in the tight end 1 position. The gap between him and Mark Andrews last year was like 100 fantasy points or something ridiculous. So, I mean, depending on how you want to construct your roster, I think you could do a lot worse than going Tyreek Hill and Amon-Ra St. Brown. But St. Brown as your wide receiver 2, that's a win there every day, all day.
Let's, by the way, comment here. Just a question from Brian Larkin wants to know if Tyler Algier should be handcuffed for all Bijan owners. I would probably do that if you're going to get him at a cheap price. Matt, how do you feel about that? And just handcuffing in general.
Yeah, you mean, I'm not a big fan of handcuffs as far as everything is concerned there, right? I mean, I'd rather have someone else's backup so I could potentially have 2 starters down the road. But with someone like Bijan Robinson and someone in this Atlanta Falcons offense, if Bijan Robinson is to go down, Bijan Robinson's probably in line for 300 touches this season. Let's call it the way it is as a rookie. This is, if you take Bijan Robinson in the first round of your fantasy drafts, I got no problem with it. I kind of see him as an early second rounder personally, but I got no problem anyone taking a shot at him, thinking Saquon Barkley rookie, thinking Ezekiel Elliott type rookie season. I think that's kind of what we're looking at for Bijan Robinson. That said, if Bijan Robinson goes down and the way that the Atlanta Falcons want to run the ball, this was a horrible offense last season. They were dreadful, except the one thing they could do was run the ball. And they ran the ball with Tyler Algier, with Cordell Patterson, with Caleb Huntley. So there's no reason not to believe that if Bijan Robinson goes down, Atlanta is just going to stop running the ball. This is something they're going to continue to do. So Tyler Algier is a perfect handcuff, even if you have Bijan Robinson.
A golf boy, long live 11 personnel, loves those 3 receiver sets. And Mr. Scampers, as a Panthers fan, Bryce Young's helmet looks too big without pads on. It does. There's no doubt about it. And I think that was a great point you made about having someone else's backup. But this being the Atlanta offense, and we saw what they did. I'm totally buying what you're selling here. By the way, his name is Matt Donnelly. You can follow him on Twitter at Matt Donnelly FF. I advise you to do that. Check out his YouTube channel as well, the Dynasty Vipers. You find him, Tara, Major, just doing a great job chopping stuff up, and always enjoy listening to them. And also, you'll see Matt in this year's Pro Forecast magazine. Football Diehards /cheat sheet /draft book. He will be ubiquitous. You will find him everywhere, and with good reason. As you can see, he's a sharp cookie. And by the way, I'm Bob Harris. In case you just tuned in and you're wondering, I'm going to be more strident about it. I promised myself at the top of the show, Matt, bear with me. I'm Bob Harris. How was that? What do you think? Did you like that one? I'm trying to be strident, Bob Harris. Hit the like button if you like that one. So you can find us at FootballDiehards.com. It's a website if you want to make your purchase for the season, magazines, content, etc. You'll just use the promo code Diehards to get a nice 15% discount. We love giving away discounts because we're good people. All right, I just made that part up. So Brian Larkin wants to know, will we draft both Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison? This could be the best wide receiver combo this season. There's something to be said for if you're putting all your eggs in one basket, to put them in a very good basket. And I think you could make the argument the Vikings passing attack is that. I don't know. Do we expect their defense to be better? Are they going to need to pass as much, Matt? How do you feel about this approach?
I think their defense is going to improve under Flores there. I mean, it can't be any worse. It was horrible last season. Their secondary was banged up. They weren't very good, and they had to throw to stay into games. And they had to throw to get back into games. I mean, this was a team that won a lot of close games that they probably shouldn't have during the regular season. And they were basically fool's gold as far as the NFL was concerned. I'm okay with taking Addison here a little bit later. I think you're going to get him as your wide receiver, probably 3 or 4 when it's all said and done. And that, for me, is value. If you look, there's teams that are going to produce multiple wide receivers in the top 12. We've seen DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. They've done this before. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase have done it. Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown have done it. And if you ask me, I'd be okay having any of those guys, having both those wide receivers from those teams, because it's about the points, right? You know that they're going to score fantasy points. Best ball, absolutely. Redraft, it's a little bit more of a concern because you're like, oh, do I really want to do it? I'm okay with it. At the end of the day, you want to score the most points you can each and every week. And let's be honest, Jordan Addison's probably not going to be your wide receiver 2. He's going to be your wide receiver 4, probably a flex option, and that is easy for me. It's not like you're really trying to, okay, if he takes too much away from, no, he's not going to take anything away from Jefferson. Jefferson is going to get his. If anything, he's going to cut into TJ Hawkinson because of his ability to run routes. He doesn't have the burst of a Marvin Mims, so to speak. He doesn't have that elite burst from the wide receiver position. He does a great job getting open, and that's going to factor in underneath, and that's where TJ Hawkinson typically works. So if anything, he's going to cut into TJ Hawkinson's. He's not going to cut into Justin Jefferson's touches, so I'm okay with that.
TJ Hawkinson, I just landed him in my first Fantasy Cares Eliminator. By the way, if you're not in an Eliminator, they're nuts this year, off the chart. If you want to get in one, you can go to fantasycares.org, find my name in the list. Matt, are you doing those this year?
I am not as of yet. I'll probably jump into a few. I usually jump into a few because really the Eliminators for me, yes, the NFL draft comes and goes. You get in some rookie drafts, but the Eliminators are really the kickoff for me to the 2023 season, right? It's like, okay, yes, here we go. Fantasy season is right here. Sure, you have a couple drafts and rookie drafts and stuff like that. Yeah, that's good and it's fun, but it's rookies. These Eliminators you're taking, it's like startup almost. It's like a new startup. It's like a redraft every year. So
it's weirder this year than ever. We have coaches involved, punters. Last year, I mean, I usually fare really well in these for something. I think it's by accident, but I've done really well the last four years or so. This year, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm drafting my first team. I'm in the 4th round. I have 3 quarterbacks and a tight end. I'm looking to land my first coach soon, and maybe a punter, and then 7 kickers and 10 defenses. That's my plan. We'll see how it works out. Defenses are really well valued. But if you want to go sign up, I'll have a second league. I think it's already got 3 or 4 people signed up into it. So get into that. I'll probably do at least 3 or 4 of them. So check that out at fantasycares.org. Got to make a little donation, give a little something to have a little fun, and it's well worth the effort. And John Bosch does a great job with those. You were sticking with the Vikings for a minute, Matt. Dalvin Cook, the intrigue continues. Ooh, yeah. Kevin O'Connell remains vague about his outcome. Let's put it this way. If you're drafting right now, and you have Dalvin Cook, are you drafting with the notion that he might not be a Viking, but he's going to be somewhere and still be Dalvin Cook?
Man, it is tough to say. Dalvin Cook is going to ruin someone's fantasy team here somewhere down the road. I think Minnesota is going to designate him as a post-June 1st cut where they can save the most money, which means he's going to be a free agent, which means one of these running backs that we're high on right now, we may not be so high on here in a few weeks. Like we're hearing the rumblings of Ezekiel Elliott potentially signing with Tampa Bay. Well, if Dalvin Cook is a post-June 1st, he played his football somewhere down in Florida, right? He was a Florida State guy. There's a possibility he could end up back in Tampa Bay because it does look like Tampa Bay is looking for that second running back, which would then crush my Rachaad White feelings because I'm a big-time fan of Rachaad White. Someone is going, it happens every year. There's always a veteran running back that comes, gets cut, is released, gets signed late, and just absolutely crushes our fantasy dreams, especially drafting this early. And I think that's what's going to happen with Dalvin Cook. I think Buffalo's, here's where my thought process is. James Cook was probably looking at Buffalo. Buffalo was probably looking at James Cook, at Dalvin Cook, and James like, no. That's why I'm switching my number to number 4, because he can't come here if I've got his number. So and that will make a lot of sense as a brother. You're like, no. If Big Brother's going to come here, I'm taking his number, so he doesn't want to come here now. So I think we know that Dalvin. The money we've seen Minnesota. They're trying to cut cap. They've been tight against the cap for a little bit of time there. They're right where they need to be right now, but they still need to cut more. We saw them make a commitment to Alexander Mattison this offseason. He got about $8 million guaranteed. And for me, that's telling me that, hey, Dalvin's probably done there, and they could save the most money designating him as a post-June 1st cap casualty, and that saves them a little bit of money moving forward, moving into the 2024, and we know that they need to add and work on some of this defense. Now, they did trade Zadarius Smith, but they also retained some of his contract here as well. So Zadarius Smith, who's now a Cleveland Brown, is still going to be on Minnesota's books there for this season and not playing for him. So I think this is one of those things where I think Dalvin Cook is probably going to be a post-June 1st cut, and he's going to mess somebody's hopes and dreams up here sooner rather than later.
So that being the case, what's your investment level or interest in buying Alexander Mattison, who tends to go a little high as a handcuff? His handcuffs go. just because he does seem to be a plug-and-play threat for when something does happen to cook. This time, the possibility is a little higher, and the money they gave him kind of suggests they're invested beyond this year at least.
Hey, you know how it goes in the NFL. Follow the money, man. Follow the money, and we're following the money here, and you should be doing the same for your fantasy leagues. If you see an investment in a back, such as Alexander Mattison, then that should kind of set off some flags that, you know what, I should probably move him up a round and a half higher than where I've got him projected. And that might not be enough, because if you're in it with some smart people, they're probably thinking the same thing. So if you really want him, you're probably going to have to reach for him. And at the draft day right now, it is going to look like you're an idiot. I'll be honest. If you're taking Alexander Mattison 2 rounds earlier than where he's going right now, people are going to make fun of you. It's going to happen. And they probably should. But when it's all said and done, the smoke settles, I think he's going to be a good value where he's currently going at, even if you give him an extra bump in ADP, 12, 13, 14 spots.
Yeah, I think it's interesting if you look at the current best ball 10. So let's look at some of the running backs who are not the primary backs on their teams that are going ahead of him. A.J. Dillon, of course, going at 30. Madison's going at 39. That list includes Jamal Williams at 32. Alvin Kamara, we'll figure that out at some point. Zach Charbonnet at 34. Antonio Gibson at 35. Khalil Herbert at 36. Tyler Algier at 37. Samaje Perine probably should be going way higher. He's at 38. Perine and Madison, I think, are both players, and they're in the same range as Deonta Foreman, Damian Harris, Rashad Penny. I think Madison and Perine, you could make an argument those guys should be going ahead of all these players, including maybe Dillon. It's probably getting in the borderline there. But I'm kind of with you, Matt. I think maybe I'm not afraid to reach on him, especially this time of year while you're getting the discount due to uncertainty. If that changes later in the year, I can make the necessary adjustments as my real drafts get closer. But that brings another back into the conversation here in a similar circumstance, and what we make of the situation for one Joe Mixon in Cincinnati, where they are being equally vague about his future.
We have already seen Joe Mixon's value take a hit. I think in a lot of the mock drafts I've done, he's gone a lot lower than what I expect. We're talking about a running back that was flirting with the first round, feeling pretty good about taking him in the second, and you're laughing if you got him in the third last season. Now you're looking at him, I think one of the more recent drafts I did with him, he was going in round 6, if I'm not mistaken. And I was like, are you kidding me? And the worst part is, round 3 comes, you're like, oh yeah, Joe Mixon's a good value. You know what? This guy I like a little bit better. Round 4, same situation. Round 5, you're like, okay, when am I going to pull the trigger on Joe Mixon? The guy is a RB1. He's a top 12 running back if he's the guy, except we don't know what's going on there. We don't know what that legal situation is going on there. And if we follow everything that Cincinnati's done, they went out there and they got it themselves. Chase Brown out of Illinois is a very capable back as well. So you're like, okay, what do we make out of this? Right now, I think you have to be in a holding pattern. I think round 4 is probably where he should go, which seems like a discount still, which I think he could provide you one of the best values in your redraft leagues this season, because you are already getting a discount because of all the other noise that we're hearing outside of the facility there in Cincinnati. At the end of the day, I think he is going to be the guy there. But right now, it's kind of hard because everything's telling me there's so much uncertainty there right now, especially Cincinnati. Like Minnesota, they're also in a bit of a financial situation too, because they got some guys that got to get paid, right? If you're looking at that, and if everyone's getting paid, if T. Higgins is getting paid, if Joe Burrow is getting paid, if Jamar Chase is getting paid, then Joe Mixon, he ain't going to get paid. So now you're trying to figure out if Joe Mixon is potentially going to be another one of those post-June 1st cuts, much like Dalvin Cook, to free up some money for some big-name tickets at the end of this next season. So there's some questions there about where Joe Mixon's future is going to be with Cincinnati. Right now, I think round 4 is probably where I'm willing to risk it. But then again, I've been the same guy. I've passed on him in round 4. I've passed on him in round 5. So I think you could take a shot at him in round 4 and be like, you know what, this feels like a good value spot. But you know what? If you think about it, a lot of your league mates are probably thinking the same. He could slide to round 5, and you could probably get more value. But be careful about that, because if you think you're getting better value each every round, someone's going to pull the trigger eventually, and then you're going to kick yourself in the back end.
Right. And so, Mr. Scampers, RIP, my boy Chris Evans, I would agree with that. By the way, the name you should be watching here is Travion Williams. If you listen to what the coaches have been saying recently, going back to pre-draft, just kind of some interesting buzz. He's a free square play, people. You know how I feel about my free squares. I am more than willing to throw a last round pick at a nobody But I think the Chris Evans value is dying, and we'll see what Chad Brown turns into. There's going to be a plan. We'll see what happens when Joe Mixon moves on. I'm kind of with Matt. I think he's still maybe worth the investment at the price he's going at, because he's going to land somewhere. I'm guessing they'll use him. Same with Dalvin Cook, who, by the way, Brian Larkin says Green Bay takes Cook out of spite. That would be a nice move. I would appreciate that. I think that would be fun to see. I mean, we all have our little fun things. Denver Broncos. We talked about Samaje Perine, criminally underpriced right now. I think that's crazy. We don't know what's going to happen with Javonte Williams. Maybe we'll get clarity. Yeah. My guess is we will not. I think this is going to be a mystery heading through training camp into the season when he'll be available and ready. We've heard hints and rumors that, or, there's certainly people out there in the league who don't feel like he's going to be, that it's possibly won't play this season. It's certainly possibly won't be ready to start the season. So that being the case, how interested are you in Samaje Perine? And beyond that, just, Sean Payton takes over this offense. Joe Lombardi comes back to join him, who was by his side as the coordinator in New Orleans for many years before going to San Diego and Los Angeles. So where are we at on this offense in general, and Perine as the starting point?
Well, I expect this Denver Broncos offense to look a lot like Sean Payton's New Orleans Saints offense. He's already gone out there. They went to the draft, they went through free agency, and they solidified that offensive line. And the one thing that Sean Payton did when he first got to New Orleans was make sure that Drew Brees, a smaller quarterback, was going to have a clean pocket to work from. And now Russell Wilson, a smaller quarterback, they've been putting in guards. They've been signing some top-end tackles here that were available on the free agency market. So, again, they're building that pocket for Russell Wilson to work out of. And he was hit hard plenty last season. So that was probably the first thing that Sean Payton saw. That said, as far as I'm a firm believer that Javonte Williams is not going to be ready anytime before week 8, week 9, week 10. I think he does play this season, but I think that knee is a lot more messed up than what we've been led to believe, or else we'd have some clarification on it at this point by now. I mean, it was vague when it happened, and it's still vague now. But that tells me that, guess what? That's not going to change for the next 3, 4, 5 months. So I'm not expecting Javonte Williams to be ready, which means you're probably getting Samaje Perine at a nice, healthy discount. And the only way that I would be even more sold on Javonte Williams not playing is if they went out there and signed Ezekiel Elliott right now. I think that would be we know right now that Williams is not going to be ready this season. And when you look at that, if you look at Perine versus Elliott, Perine gives you that pass-catching ability. Look what he did for Cincinnati when Joe Mixon went out of the lineup. Perine doesn't strike you as a pass-catching back, but it's something he certainly can do. We've seen him have success in Cincinnati's offense. And I think with the improvements that Sean Payton's made, he may not get the touches that you would like from a top-end running back, but I think he's going to be efficient with those touches. Look at Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara never had a lot of touches, but he was very efficient with the touches that he got, which gave him a high-end ceiling there as far as fantasy is concerned. I would expect that to be very similar for Samaje Perine, and right now you're getting him at RB3 value. So why wouldn't you take a shot at a running back that you're getting this late in drafts that could potentially be a high-end RB2 when it's all said and done?
Yep, totally with you there. And by the way, Leonard Fournette is still out there lurking around.
He's another one of those guys that's going to wreck someone.
So, yeah, and it's going to happen, and you'll be prepared and be able to deal with it. And some of these free score plays we've mentioned can be helpful. What about that receiving core? I mean, it seems like Courtland Sutton's still going to be there. Maybe we see some kind of move as we get into training camp. But Jerry Jeudy seems to be locked in. But Tim Patrick, to me, is an overlooked commodity when we're talking about free square players. A guy you can get super late who had a great role in the past. Just for the passing game in general, if I'm looking to dig that deep or play a sleeper hunch or like that, what are your expectations for the Seattle passing or Seattle? I've Russell Wilson myself there. What are your expectations for Russell Wilson in the Denver passing attack under Sean Payton?
I think it's going to be a very spread out attack. I mean, I think Courtland Sutton's going to be that big target when it comes down to the red zone. I think they're going to still use him there. Remember, they just basically got a third tight end too. They got the candy man there, Alberto. They've got Greg Dulcich there. And then they traded for Adam Troutman from New Orleans. So who knows what they're doing there. They got 3 tight ends. They're turning into like the Raiders who support like 8 tight ends on their roster. And then the wide receiver room, you mentioned this. Courtland Sutton, I think it offers you that big player there in the red zone. Then you got Jerry Jeudy that does it all. very refined route runner, one of the best route runners probably in the league. Then you got Tim Patrick, who missed last season because of an ACL, so you're getting him at a discount because we haven't seen him play recently. KJ Hamler is still there, and then they went out there and drafted, basically, like I said, Jordan Addison, but with burst when it comes to Marvin Mims. So Marvin Mims does everything that Jordan Addison can do. He's not as refined as a route runner, but he has got burst. I mean, the dude was seeing 17.2 yards per target his last season there at Oklahoma, which is better than what CeeDee Lamb had. So you're looking at, I mean, Marvin Mims could be that. Who's going to be that third option? Who's going to be that second option? I think we believe that Judy's going to be the top option. I think we want to believe that Cortland Sutton's going to be that number 2, but who's going to be the number 3? Tim Patrick, underrated. He was that number 3 option. He was even a number 2 option there because we don't know if any of these Denver Broncos wide receivers can stay healthy because not one of them has stayed healthy the last few seasons. Sutton's battled injury. Judy's battled injury. Those two can't seem to play together. They both do extremely well. They both become wide receiver ones when the other one's not playing. I mean, that's basically been the kiss of death. Cortland Sutton, you're like, all right, this is the best investment I made in fantasy last season. And then Jerry Jeudy was playing. You're like, oh, dude, what is Cortland Sutton going to do? His numbers like nosedive. And then Jeudy got hurt, and then all of a sudden Sutton's starting to rise again. So, I mean, these two can't seem to play with one another. Or I don't know what the reasoning is behind all that. But again, with the running game being the way it is, and with Sean Payton coming in there, Sean Payton likes to get cute with this offense. So I'm expecting it to be spread out. I'm expecting to see a lot of 3 wide receivers set from time to time. It's just who's going to be that third wide receiver, because I really, really, really love Marvin Mims. I think he is fantastic for this offense because he is explosive, and I think that's what they're missing. Tim Patrick isn't explosive. KJ Hamler, not explosive. Cortland Sutton, not explosive. Jerry Jeudy, he can find himself open, but man, Marvin Mims is a different dog altogether when it comes to this passing game. It's just, will he be able to move up into this pecking order sooner rather than later? But like I said, Tim Patrick, another guy you're using a 14th round pick probably on in a lot of these redraft leagues, definitely worth a shot of the dart here.
I'm not sure I'm here for that Patrick slander there, but we'll live with it. So Kareem Hunt, by the way, Aaron Martinez mentions, is still out there, and he is indeed. And there's been some talk that he'd slowed down a little bit. Let's ask, kind of spin that into a Nick Chubb situation. Last year, very run heavy offense. I'm expecting them to be pass heavier this year. How do you see this offense developing with Deshaun Watson getting the full season now?
I am low-key liking this Cleveland Browns offense. Another year with Deshaun Watson getting his footing back there. They're giving him weapons. I mean, Donovan Peoples-Jones and Amari Cooper are really good, and they get themselves Cedric Tillman, who is an Alpha X type wide receiver there out of Tennessee, so that gives them an option as well. And then you look at some of the other things that they got going on there, and it's the run game. Back this up. Tight end, they still got David Njoku there, so they still got some value there at the tight end position. So he's got himself 4 viable options in the passing game. Nick Chubb in the running game, and the guy we can't forget, you want to talk about dart throws, how about Jerome Ford? There's a reason why Kareem Hunt is expendable in this Browns offense, and it's because of Jerome Ford. We saw what he did at the University of Cincinnati. He's a very capable back. He can catch the ball out of the backfield, and I think he's going to offer them a little bit more in the passing game than what we're used to. We know Nick Chubb is not used in the passing game for the Cleveland Browns. Never has been. It's probably one of those things. He's probably one of those underrated skill sets where we know when he gets the ball in his hands, it doesn't matter if it's in a short pass or if it's in the run game, he's going to make something happen. We just don't get to see him in the passing game very often. And I think Jerome Ford is a player that the Cleveland Browns are looking forward to seeing him fill that Kareem Hunt void moving forward.
I think that's a fair assessment there. And so says Matt Donnelly. Again, follow him on Twitter at Matt Donnelly FF. He does great work out there with the Dynasty Vipers. Find his podcast out there, also his YouTube channel. Check him out. You find him in this year's Pro Forecast and other fantasy sports publications. He's become a great contributor. You'll hear him on the radio program over the course of the rest of the offseason and into the season. As you well know, he has become a favorite of mine, and I hope yours as well. Matt, thanks again for coming on. We'll do this again soon. In the meanwhile, everybody, hit the Football Diehards website, use the promo code Diehards to get your discount. Listen to me on the radio with Mike Dempsey tonight, 7 p.m. We'll be covering a couple teams. We'll have Drew Davenport on. I might get into some of those legal issues that he is so knowledgeable about, but also just a very good fantasy player in general. And I guess that's it. I'm Bob Harris. How was that one? That was great. Over and out.
Much better.
Thanks for Thanks for coming, everybody. We'll see you here Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time.